Yeah, hi everyone. Welcome to this Google Digital Garage training session measuring what matters to Google Analytics. This event is brought to you by the Irish SME Association in partnership with Google Digital Garage. Before we begin today's session, I would like to take a couple of minutes to introduce myself and explain the session objectives. My name is Eike Emails. Just a bit about myself. I'm an experienced Google marketing platform tech manager with a background in digital marketing, and I've worked in the sector for 6 years now. I would also like to introduce our moderator, Emma. Emma is a Google Digital Garage coach and will be interacting with you and answering some of your questions via the instant chat to the right there. You can identify the moderator by her name as well as a little blue spanner next to her name. So just before we start, I just wanted to call out a few things to help you today. Firstly, if you're having any trouble viewing the webinar right now, please do try refreshing your page right now. If you would like to join the instant chat today, you do need a YouTube account, which you can very easily set up by clicking in the box on the right there. We will be pausing throughout the session to answer the more complex questions from the chat box, so please do feel free to fire away with your questions throughout. Just to let you know, we are running this Google Digital Garage virtual training as part of a wider series in partnership with the Irish SME Association. If you would like to check out the schedule, please see information on this in the description below, which links you through to the website. Also, feel free to share your experience on social media and tell your friends and family about these webinars using the hashtag Google Digital Garage. Lastly, if you have any feedback from today's session, please complete the feedback form linked down in the description box. Once you complete the feedback form, a link will appear for you to download a PDF of today's content. We will also keep the webinar live for you to rewatch for 24 hours. So that's the housekeeping done. Let's look at what we will cover today. Again, welcome to our session on measuring what matters with Google Analytics. Firstly, we will start to check out what is analytics exactly and why it's important. Then we are going to look at how analytics reports data and how it receives data. Third, we are going to look at some reports which I find super interesting and that I think will be of most benefit for every single company to use properly. And of course, we will then dive into how you can create success for your own business from good measurement and attribution. So let's do a little icebreaker here to get everyone involved in using the chat function. How many of you have analytics activated on the website? You can enter it into the little question box. Let's see if people can find it just to the right there. Let's wait a bit. So how many of you have analytics activated on the website? Okay, I see a lot are using it already, a few not. That's perfect for today's session. And how many of you actually use it on, let's say, a weekly basis? So how many of you are using analytics on a weekly basis? If you're using a daily, even better, but weekly basis would be also great to see. Brandon, I see you are using it very regularly. That's perfect. So thank you for joining in today, everyone. Let's jump into part one. What is Google Analytics? So why is this important? We will, well, I've got a lot of great content to share with you today, but I first wanted to acknowledge that we realize that for many of you, these days are not business as usual. As we continue to adapt to COVID-19 in Ireland and across the globe, we understand that today's landscape is creating new challenges for you, your business, and your customers. Many of you have reached out to let us in Google know that this type of training comes at a crucial time. So thank you again for that. When market dynamics change rapidly, it can be hard to grasp how people's needs are evolving. So our companies need to define our business plans based on data. Analytics is just pure 100% data, and it can be managed by you. It can be looked by you. It can be filtered by you. You can do everything you want with it. And that's the potential what we are going to look to unlock for you today. If we move on, let's turn our attention to part one of today's session, understanding what Google Analytics is. It seems like a lot of you, or some of you at least, have already used analytics. So that's perfect. Google Analytics is the most widely used web analytics tool that tracks and reports website, mobile sites, and app traffic. So what analytics does, it records every user that comes to your website and understands what they're doing, where they're coming from, and what their demographics are in terms of geolocation. And there's a lot more information within it that we are going to explore today. So once a user arrives on your website, you can really understand what your website is good at, what pages are engaging, and eventually you can find out if they are converting via a sale, for example, lead generation, or another action you wish them to take on. And don't worry, we'll chat more about events and conversions in the final section of this presentation. It's important to mention before we get started that we will be looking at the new analytics in today's webinar. That's Google Analytics 4, GA4. Many of you already set up with analytics will likely be using Universal Analytics. So you will notice some differences in the reports, metrics, and features we look at here. Also, certainly some familiarities too. I'd love to hear in the chat if anyone is using GA4, Google Analytics 4 yet. That would be interesting to know. Or did you hear already something about GA4? We also call it the future of analytics. So that's great that you joined today, because that's something we will also cover in the next minutes. Okay. So I will also, mostly, I see. Most of you do not use GA4 yet, but that's no problem. That's why we're here today, and that's something we will explore now. So GA4 is the next generation of Google Analytics. Although you might have encountered it as app and web properties before, one of the big changes is that Google Analytics properties can be used for an app, website, or both together. It offers full cross-device, cross-platform reporting with machine learning throughout to improve insight discovery. It also brings some advanced features, such as analysis into version 4 of analytics at no charge. And these might have previously been paid for options in the older analytics. The new property also makes it easier to create and segment audiences. We will start out by looking at setup. So whether you're using Universal Analytics at the moment or are completely brand new to analytics, we can all get started together. That's no problem. And if you're using the previous version, you can keep this running alongside the new one while you get to know it better. So that's it. Let's move on. How does it work? There are 4 parts I'm going to be talking about. First, the collection. which is effectively linking your website to Google Analytics, so it can start collecting the data you need for all the reports we will look at later. Then there is the processing. Once a user hit is collected on Google's servers, the next step is data processing. This is the transformation step that turns your raw data into something meaningful. The configuration is a step where analytics applies your configuration settings to the raw data. For example, you can mark certain IP addresses as internal. And finally, of course, the reporting, which is the most important one and what we will be spending a lot of time on today. Now, please take into account that without the collection being done properly, the reporting can end up being a bit of mess. It happens a lot, and the vast majority of the issues that we receive with the clients we work with are actually because the collection stage is not done properly. So that's quite crucial. That's also the reason why I would like to focus a bit more on the collection and the setup. So let's take a look at it. Google Analytics is available at no charge and gives you an in-depth look at your website and or app performance. To collect data from your website, you will need to add a code called the global site tag within the page script of each web page that you want to measure. Every time a new page is loaded, the tracking code will be loaded as well, and this will send data to Google Analytics. That's how it works, actually. So to start collecting basic data from a website, there are a few steps to keep in mind. The first one is create or sign in to your analytics account. If you're creating a new account, you will be guided through the process of setting up what Google Analytics calls a data stream. This is a website or app. You can have more than one data stream in your account, but you will need to set them up one at a time. And when you've entered all the details, you will end up on a page called Web Stream Details. That's the second step. Web Stream Details for setting up, or for connecting it with your website, which has a section called Tagging Instructions. And the third step here is if you have already started the process before in your admin panel, you can find data streams there to get back to the tagging instructions. So that's quite crucial for setting up the data streams. This little code found in the tagging instruction is what Analytics uses to understand someone arrived to my website, the global site tag. I know it looks scary, but don't worry, you 100% do not need to know the details of it. I like to think of this JavaScript like yeast when baking. For example, I'm an amateur baker. I have no idea what yeast does, but I know when making bread, I'm supposed to put it in because that's what makes it work. Same thing here. This JavaScript turns to Analytics after a user has landed on your website. And it tells Analytics to pay attention and note down how this cookie got there. To add the tag to your website, highlight and copy this code called the global site tag and paste it right after the opening tag on each web page you want to measure. You may be able to do this yourself or ask for a website developer for help. If you have already been using the previous version of Google Analytics, you will also have the option to use your existing tag instead of starting from scratch. Emma will share a link in the chat with further details on setting up the tag with instructions for some common CMS. You can also use the Google Tag Manager to add your tag. Google Tag Manager is a great way to manage code on your website, as instead of adding individual snippets of code, you're adding a container that you can just log in to add or configure tags in future. It's also a great tool for setting up custom event tags, which we will come back to later. Emma will share a video showing how to add this Google Tag Manager container. But essentially, log in, copy this JavaScript over, hit save, log out, you are done. Nice and easy. If you do feel like you need someone else to add code to your site or to manage any future configuration, you can add multiple users to Tag Manager too. That's also possible. Next up, understanding your data. So that's also super crucial. First of all, Google Analytics divides everything into two things: dimensions and metrics. Dimensions are super straightforward. Everything that isn't a number. So which city or country are users coming from, which traffic source, which browser type, which operating system, etc. All of this data is available in analytics. Then there is the metrics, which are things like how many sessions happened within the time range we've chosen, how many users, how long are users engaged for, and much more. All the numbers basically in analytics. So we have dimensions and metrics. This is the GA4 homepage, the Google Analytics 4 homepage, where you land when you first log in. And it shows you lots of information straight away. We are just seeing one of the charts here, but it's a whole dashboard showing an overview of everything from locations to top pages to top e-commerce products. The first metric I want to mention is user. How does analytics know you're a user? Now I can get into your website today, tomorrow, the day after, and I'm the same user in each instance. The first time I went to your website, say a week ago, for example, there's a code behind that page that asks analytics to put a cookie on your browser. And this cookie says, okay, this user, for example, me, with a certain completely encrypted user number defined by analytics, went to your website at this time. Then when I come back, it realized, hey, I've seen this encrypted user number before. This is the same person. It's me. So it doesn't count it as a new user, but as a returning one. So that one is pretty straightforward. Next is average engagement time. This is the average length of time that the website had focus in the browser or the app was in the foreground. So this is a little different from average session duration, which those of you using the previous version of analytics will have seen before. So this homepage serves as a quick overview of the data, as well as a good jumping off point into other reports, as it links to a lot of the key sections of analytics we might be interested in exploring. Okay, so we have seen the homepage. Now let me explain some of the basics of traffic sources. Traffic sources are how analytics reports where a user is coming from. So to get to your website, a user could have come from social media, clicked on an ad, and appeared on your lovely website. We know that there's so many potential ways into your website via search engines, video, email, social media, whatever. And with the adoption of the smartphone, this trend is actually increasing more and more. Let's take the example of a shared tablet at home. What would your last 10 searches look like on that? Now take your mobile phone. What would your last 10 searches look like on that? It's very personal and unique to you. It's a brain dump of, I want information that's immediate, fast acting with high intent. So how does analytics know where you come from in this big journey? Well, it works with the URL actually. So that means from Google Ads, for example, when I click on an ad, there is going to be the URL, let's say myshinyshoes.com. And then after that, I will see like a small parameter called gclit. It will literally say gclit and then a long group of numbers, letters, and symbols, which is an encrypted version of which Google Ads campaign this person's coming from. And this information is passed to Google Analytics. So now that means it means that it's the URL through which analytics identifies users and where they come from. So if that URL is not properly placed or something happens to get it or something happens to the gclit so that analytics cannot read it, that's where you can start to find data traffic discrepancies actually. For example, if I click on an ad and Google automatically puts this gclit in place for us, lovely. I go to your website, but there's a redirect in place. And that happens quite often. So I come from Google search, I go to page X, and I'm redirected to page Y. This means I will have arrived to a page view where it says from google.com, but without any parameter after the redirect, and it will assume it's organic. Or direct none, which means I've got no idea where it's coming from. This happens also a lot. In Google Analytics, we can look at the user's acquisition report to see a list of all these different sources and get insight into where our users are coming from. That's what you can see here on this slide. As you can imagine, this is a very useful report for digital marketers to see which of their efforts are driving traffic to the website. It's a bit small to read here, but you might see sources such as Google, LinkedIn, and Direct, and each one also has a medium. For example, organic, CPC, referral. This is the general category of the source. We can view them separately, like here, where we just see source, or look at source and medium together to build a more detailed picture of where users are coming from. It's also possible. Now, Google CPC is the one that that is defined by auto tagging in Google Ads as both Google Ads and Google Analytics are Google. So we have this gclit parameter I mentioned. But what about all of the other sources? Yeah, how does analytics know about these? Well, with the same emphasis on URLs, you can add something to any other source URL called a UTM parameter, which are these things on the left, and I will go into them in a second. But first, let's look at auto tagging. As I mentioned, auto tagging is just a tick on Google Ads. Emma will share a link that shows you how to turn this in your on in your settings. So once you've turned this on, auto tagging adds a useful bit of information to your URLs using this gclit parameter that Google Analytics can then use to report on how those ad clicks turn into user activity. Now, this is the lovely thing called Campaign URL Builder for everything that's not Google Ads. So everything that's not Google Ads, for this, I recommend you to use the Campaign URL Builder. On this page, you will just add your website. Let's say myshinyshoes.com. You just enter it in the field website URL, and you will define a campaign source and a campaign medium. Source is actually required, but it's important to define a medium here also. For example, my source could be Facebook, but my medium was, say, organic, as I'm adding this URL to an organic post that I'm putting up. It's a really simple way, but incredibly vital step when creating some content, be it an ad or organic, and you want to ensure that analytics understands where that user is coming from, so that we can analyze success later. To keep in mind, or as a best practice to remember, don't tag Google Ads Media. That's the biggest mistake. Don't tag Google Ads Media. This is done automatically. Use just the variables that you need, source, medium, term, and don't send PII, so personally identifiable information. So keep this in mind. That's our best practice for using the campaign URL media and to track your sources correctly. Yeah, let's check whether there are any questions from the live chat. So let's have a short pause in order to check what's top of mind for you guys. Okay, I see there are already questions. So a user comes in through a particular channel, leaves, comes back through different channel and buys something second time. Which channel gets attributed the conversion? Attribution is a big topic because you can decide which attribution model you are going to take. We have different options available also in GA, and also with GA4 there are more options coming, including including budget allocation, for example. However, the most common used attribution model is last click. So it depends on where the last click took place, and then the conversion is attributed to the last click. That's a quite common way of attributing conversions. However, data-driven attribution models are also quite good. That's something I would recommend you to dive deeper into and check out which attribution model is the best one for your business. It all depends also on your business, on your campaigns. But we have different options available for you also in GA, and we can also provide some more information via the chat on analytics attribution models. Emma will share some more information on that. So let's wait a few more seconds, whether there are any questions left. Otherwise, we proceed. But yeah, that's something I also definitely recommend you to take into account to check all the different attribution models we have available for you. And also analyze your performance with different attribution models, especially data-driven is a good way to check. Perfect, there are no more questions. Then let's move on and let's check how Google Analytics reports are working. And that's a third section here. So halfway there, next up, GA reports. I hope I haven't lost you, and you would implore to start firing questions into the chat, and we can go through at the end of the session our final Q&A. Now onto the Google Analytics reports. For those who have used the previous version of Analytics, you may notice that some of these report names are familiar and others are new. For example, some of the reports that used to be in the audience section in Universal Analytics are now in demographics, tech, and retention reports in GA4. So let's start with users reports. And now we know where the user is coming from. Let's try to understand who those users are. Under the user reports category, we have two sections, demographics and tech. Well, there's a lot of really nice reports in Analytics for Audience. This is one that I really like as it helps to inform all marketing and business strategy. This is the demographics overview report, as you can see it here on the slide. And it's a map view of users by country, which shows visually where our users are coming from geographically. So the darker blue areas here are where the higher numbers of users are coming from, like the UK and the US in this example. But you may want to see more detail, and so do I. So we can also look at the user numbers by region, city, language. And if we prefer, we can change users to new or returning users to narrow down to a particular audience type. When we go into the detailed report, which is a table, we can see not only users, but other useful metrics, such as engagement rate, conversions, and revenue too. In the tech reporting section, another report, we can learn more about device types, browsers, and operating systems, for example. This can give us some insight into the technology our audience is using. And here we are seeing the device categories from this particular time period. So desktop, mobile, tablet, we can see for this site that a majority of the users visited on desktop. It's ordering by the highest number of users by default, but we can also look at the other columns to see the engagement rates and conversions for different device categories. We could even change device category to device model to get even more specific. That's also possible. I was working with a brand, for example, that had an iPhone only, high-end marketing persona, which they pre-assumed spent 75% more than average after some first-party research. Cool. However, just before they went into production of their app, we had a look at their own website's analytics. And although their Android users collectively spent less on average than Apple users. It was just a marginal 4%. However, Android made up 68% of their transactions in total. So their marketing persona from some primary interviews was lovely, but didn't stand up to the data the business already had. If they had a look, and look, that was one particular business, it could work completely the opposite for yours or whatever, but just make sure you're making informed decisions with this data and act upon your insights. And that's what's possible with GA4 actually. Analytics, as we've mentioned, looks at every click that comes into your website from various media, all tracked through the URLs. And if you want to get specific, through UTM parameters that we spoke about just before. The acquisition reporting section that we've seen already shows where our users are coming from, not geographically this time, but by source, medium, and campaign. There are so many reports in GA4, but let's keep it simple and start with channels, because the channel reporting is one of the most relevant ones. Our user acquisition report shows the different mediums or category of source our users are coming from. So we can see here, for example, all of our visits in this time period grouped by mediums like organic, CPC, referral. You could also see, for instance, email display or affiliates here. First is where those users have come from. So this is where we get the sources, which I mentioned before, grouped together into their mediums. And organic search here, for example, is really important, driving the highest number of users and nearly half of the new users, as you can see it. In the full table below the chart, we can see which channels are most important for the business in terms of driving engagement. The medium bringing in the highest number of users may not always be the one that drives the most events or results in the highest engagement rate. So it's important to focus on the metric that best fits your goals. And finally, we can see which marketing channels are driving conversions and revenues. Note that this is on what we call a last click attribution model, like I mentioned it earlier. So which channel scored the goal with the final touch, not which channels played a part if users have come back multiple times. While we are talking about acquisition and how users are getting to our website, it's worth mentioning another tool available at no charge that is helpful in understanding these journeys. This is the Search Console, yeah? And the Search Console shows how your website is showing up organically in Google search. So for a site like the one we were just looking at, with a high percentage of visitors from organic search, this is a very useful tool for understanding that step before they got to your website. Note, it's important to flag that this tool is not currently integrated with GA4, but it is a useful tool to consider, much like Tag Manager. Some of the data Search Console can show you includes which keywords people looked at, which position you had organically, never in terms of ads, and also the click-through rate or percentage of people who saw your pages in organic search results and clicked on them. Emma will also share a link to Search Console, which you can use then either to access your reports if you are already set up, or get started if you haven't yet. So you will receive a link via the chat with more information on the Search Console, but really a super useful option. Okay, let's go into engagement. Now we've looked at where your users came from, acquisition, who they are, demographics and tags. And now let's look at what they do when they reach your site. So engagement, what happens on your site. In engagement, we can get information on how our users engage with content on our website or app. We see events in here, which we will talk about shortly. For now, let's take a look at the overview report and how we can use some of these insights. We can see a couple of key metrics here, such as average engagement time and average engagement time per session. And the graph is showing the first one. So that's the engagement overview in GA4. In the pages and screens report, still within the engagement section, we can see all of our website pages and some key metrics like users, total views, scrolls, events, and conversions. So basically everything you need to know regarding your users. This helps us to understand how users are interacting with different pages or sections of the website, perhaps over a longer time period. We can spot pages that have a higher engagement time or trigger events. So we can learn from them and improve those pages at the opposite end of the scale that aren't getting as many views or as much engagement as we'd hope. It's important to remember here that to compare like with like. There's no point comparing your homepage to a product page to a blog page, as they all have different purposes and will be engaged within different ways. So it's best to group content and compare a product page to another product page. For instance, the search function within this report can make it easier. That's my advice, to use the search function here also. Retention or retention reports, that's a separate section, not within engagement, but it can also give us valuable insight into user behavior over a longer time period. So are users coming back, for example? We can view new versus returning users as well as user retention by cohort here. But the retention section also shows us the percentage of new users who return each day, user engagement over time, and lifetime value. If your website or business type is one where you would expect to see users coming back over and over again, this would be very, very useful, a very, very useful report to keep an eye on, as you can see how users return over time. Or if, for example, you are running a campaign to bring new users, but hope to retain them as ongoing customers, this is actually then where you will find that data in GA4. Finally, using analytics to drive business success. So on to the last and most important section here, conversions. All the data in the world is useless unless you can derive an insight that drives valuable action. And that's where our conversions and events come in. So what actions are important? Before we go into events and conversions, it would be great to hear from you, from some of you, what you consider to be important actions users can take on your website or app. So please let us know in the chat. It's actually different for every business, and each business will have some bigger main goals as well as some smaller actions that are still useful to track. So I would continue, and then let's also check what you guys have entered into the chat. So what you consider to be important actions users can take on your website or app. Okay, first I want to make a distinction between measurement and attribution. Measurement is the what and how, actually. It's my little green book where I note down all those interactions that the user is having, and we've been talking about that so far. However, to what end? I just said that all the data in the world is useless unless we can derive an insight and action. So our final piece of the puzzle is creating some goals that our measurement is aimed towards. This can be sales, leads, watching a video, downloading a brochure, for example, whatever. Essentially, a conversion is a specific customer activity that is valuable to your business. Attribution is what we do after we've noted everything down in our little green book. It's deciding which of our limited marketing efforts we can put into what audience, channel, country, etc., in order to maximize conversions for your business and get the best return on your effort. So measurement and attribution are distinct, but come hand in hand. So let's see if any of you have had a chance yet to share the actions that are most important to you. So let's check. See, Richard filled in something. Purchases, Garo Electric, viewing products and checking out the Donkey Sanctuary donations. Yeah, that's perfect. And it shows greatly that it's definitely tailored to your business. And everyone has specific conversions on the website to focus on. And yeah, especially with GA4, it's a great chance also to review all the conversions you have been already collecting or you are planning to collect, because it's even more crucial to make it right directly from the beginning, to track the right conversions in order to focus on these then in the future. If we move on, regarding events, we have two reporting areas within the events section in Google Analytics for events and conversions. Some of you may have already set up goals in the previous version of Analytics, so you may have an understanding of what's important for you to track, but there is an opportunity here to come up with a measurement plan for each of your properties and make sure you're looking at the key actions from the beginning. And it's something I would like to highlight here. Think about your macro or bigger conversions, such as sales or leads, but also micro conversions, like a user downloading your menu or watching a video. These might even be different for your website versus your app. Next, you have to work out how to track these. Events are triggered as users interact with your website or app. Some event types like ad clicks or certain app actions are automatically created by Google Analytics. So you don't need to do anything. If you enable enhanced measurement in your admin settings, this will collect events such as engagement with embedded views or file downloads, for example. You can also set up in GA4 additional events. So Google Analytics has a list of predefined events for different types of website. Or you can go down the custom route. So what you need to set up here will very much depend on your website or app and business goals. So Emma will share a link to further information for you to look over. And we also have specific advices for different business types, how to set up event tracking in GA4. Once these are set up, you will see Analytics start to populate the all events report. In fact, you may already have some data in there from automatically created events if you are already set up, as well as an overview in that main report. You can focus in on a specific event by clicking on it, which is what we've done here for the download underlined menu event. We can spot here days where menu downloads peaked, as well as the total events and number of users taking that action in the time period we've chosen. Further down the same report, we can see a breakdown of this event by country and gender. That's also possible in GA4. At this point, we may have many different events we are tracking and can measure in the all events report, but it's important to identify those really key actions for your business and set them up as conversion events. Conversions are user activities that contribute to the success of your business. For those using Universal Analytics, it's similar to goals. Of course, Google Analytics has no way of knowing which events are the most important to you. Yeah, so you have to tell it. You can do this in the events report by toggling each event on or off to mark it as a conversion. That's an option which is available. Or you can go into the conversions report and set it up from there. You can choose up to 30 conversion events per property. And on top of that, Analytics automatically marks 4 key app events as well as purchases as conversions, which may be relevant to your business as well. So up to 30 conversion events per property. That's something you need to keep in mind. If an event stops being important to you, you can remove it from conversions, although I wouldn't recommend changing this too regularly, and make sure anyone else you're working with is on the same page as to what should and shouldn't count. Once we've set up events and conversions to reflect our goals, Google Analytics starts to collect this data, and we can dive into some of the reports. We can see top-line conversion figures in the conversions report. Yeah, top-line conversion figures, as well as some of the other reporting areas we already looked at earlier, like acquisition, for example. If we want to see the total number of conversions per traffic source. But if we want to focus in on a particular conversion event, we can just click on it to open its own report. That's also possible. For this purchases conversion, we can see which sources and mediums brought converting users to our site. In this case, you see it, referrals from other websites were responsible for the majority. This helps us to understand which marketing channels are good at driving certain conversions and get a bit more insight into our users too. Maybe your users from Facebook are more likely to watch a particular video, but those coming from email marketing campaigns tend to buy something. That might be possible. So you might already have an intuition, but the conversions report can back this up with data. Yeah, so that's also a report I highly recommend you to use or start using. Okay, one small success story. This is actually a giant brand, I know, and this study was published many years ago as well. I like to think of case studies coming from the top 2% of businesses right up there, and they're going to help spur actions, and the rest of the top 20% of the businesses. So this is a top quintile, but Google Analytics uses is so ubiquitous that I think every business I've worked with in the last 4.5 years, 6 years at Google, has already had it in place. So, however, that certainly doesn't mean that everyone was using it correctly, which is why we were here today. So that's definitely the case study I would like to highlight here. Yeah. Let's check another time the moderation doc for questions from the live chat. So, are there any more questions regarding GA4, the possibilities? So what I also can tell you is that with GA4, you're also able to predict the future somehow. So there are ways to predict conversions, for example. That's really a great benefit of GA4, and definitely also interesting to take a look at. How can we make sure, I see the question, how can we make sure GA isn't monitoring our own stuff's use of our website? How can we make sure that GA isn't monitoring our own stuff's use of our website? From GTI Travel. Yeah, that's a good question. Thanks for that. You have different options, especially with GA4. You have the option to delete data, to exclude data, and to exclude users also. So that's an option you can use. And Emma will probably also share some more information on that. Then I also see from Kimi the question, can you see any data about your competition? Yes, you can, especially with Universal Analytics. You have the option to use benchmark reports. Yeah. So benchmarking allows you to compare your data with aggregated industry data from other companies who share their data. So this provides some good context, helping you to set meaningful targets. It helps you to gain insight into trends occurring across your industry and find out what you are doing compared to your competition. So that's possible also with Universal Analytics. So something I definitely recommend you to take a look at, benchmark reports in Universal Analytics. Perfect. So if there are no more questions, otherwise we will also follow up on open points and questions. I suggest that we move on to check the next steps. So Emma will share some useful links in the chat now to help you continue your learning online. They are Google Analytics, the Google Analytics YouTube channel. So youtube.com/Google Analytics and the Analytics Academy. I've also taken several courses in the Academy, so I'm a big fan of it. So analytics.google.com/analytics/academy, as far as I remember it. And of course, Google Digital Garage. So yeah, these are also the three resources I highly recommend you to use. So the YouTube channel, the Academy, and the Google Digital Garage. Yes, thank you all for your questions. If there are any open questions, feel free to let us know. We are going to wrap up here as we are out of time almost. I hope that has been a useful dive into Google Analytics today. As I mentioned at the beginning of the session, if you're interested in more training from Google Digital Garage, there are a few ways you can continue learning. We are running more Google Digital Garage webinars in different subjects in partnership with the Irish SME Association. Yeah. If you would like to check out the schedule of webinars, please see information on this in the description below. There will be different topics available to watch, and we will be updating the schedule regularly. We will also be leaving this video up for you to view for 24 hours. Plus, if you would like to carry on learning online in your own time, check out the Google Digital Garage website for more online training courses, which are available to you 24/7. If you would like to share your experience on social media to tell your friends and family about us, be sure to use the hashtag Digital Garage. Finally, if you have any feedback from today's session, please complete the feedback form, which is linked down in the description box below. That would be super helpful. Thanks everyone for joining today. We look forward to welcoming you again to another Google Digital Garage training session soon. And I hope this helped you a bit to get familiar with GA4, with the future of analytics, and to get started with analytics actually. So have a nice day, everyone, and talk to you soon.